Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Bossy, president of Ag Resource Company in Chicago, and we'd like to offer a brief overview, if we could, of the August crop report. This ends up being one of the biggest numbers of the summer. Today's report had a few inconsistencies, but nonetheless, it's going to be seen to the market as being slightly negative. We would expect that futures will be a little lower to start out with here. But again, in a broad sense, I think the markets have got to look beyond this report a little bit in terms of, will we be able to get these crops home? Will there be any disease pressure? And generally, what will be happening with crops in other parts of the world? Of real interest to a lot of people in New York, the hedge fund industry, is this Indian monsoon, and also some of the dryness that's starting to crop into some of the areas of southern hemisphere, Argentina and Australia. So those will be very important as we look towards the end of August and into September, but we'll all kind of be focused on crop watch once we get frost watch once we get beyond the Labor Day holiday. The big number of the morning was going to be the U.S. corn yield, coming in at a record for the month of August at 159.5 bushels per acre. That's going to be up somewhere in the vicinity of 4.5 bushels an acre from last year's record at 155. Now, this is only for the NASS report in August, but it does show anyway that we do have the second largest U.S. corn crop in history, somewhere in the vicinity of 12.7 billion bushels. So it's a sizable crop. The corn market has fallen about $1.40 a bushel since the middle of June based on this crop size. The Iowa corn yield was a record large 185 bushels per acre. So a very healthy yield for Iowa, and of course reflects some of these new biogenetic varieties and the ability to produce seed. As we look towards U.S. corn end stocks, the USDA lowered end stocks on old crop by about 50 million bushels to 1720. They also, of course, put a new crop end stock number below the old crop end stock number at 1.621 billion bushels. So on a stock use basis, because we do now have new crop corn usage at a record 12.875 billion bushels, end stocks will decline to 1.6 on stock use ratios. It's the lowest in the last 3 years. And so that's got some of the hedge funds a little excited, seeing that they need to maybe be coming out of some of their short positions here and getting to the sidelines. I think that's why you're going to see some support in the corn market here on any weakness. On a global basis, U.S. corn end stocks, or world corn end stocks, were up about 2 million metric tons, 141.49 million metric tons, largely due to the U.S. crop. That was the big change, if you will. As we look towards China, the Chinese crop was left unchanged at 162.5 million metric tons. I would also mention there's a lot of talking around the markets this morning about Egypt. Egypt is trying to get GMO-free grain and oilseeds into their country. That's having some negative implications for the corn market, since U.S. corn is GMO variety, and they may have to switch to either EU or Brazilian sources. As we look at the soybean market, and again, this is a guesstimate. We use that because there's really no pods to count of at this point. USDA forecasts the yield in August 1st at 41.7 bushels per acre. That's up a bushel from the 2000 record of 40.7 bushels per acre. So again, a very healthy yield at this juncture. USDA left harvested acreage at 76.8 million acres. On corn, they didn't find any additional corn acres. It was left at 87 million. They reduced harvested acreage by 100,000 acres. So really no changes from the June seedings report. As we look towards ending stocks, USDA lowered soybean ending stocks 40 million bushels in the new crop position to 210 million bushels. They should have probably taken them down more. Exports were cut 10 million bushels to 1265. Crush was cut 10 million bushels to 1670. It almost looks like, to us anyway, the USDA wanted to keep the end stock figure in beans over 200 million bushels. Now, remember, U.S. soybean sales are record large for the date. China still has a ferocious appetite for U.S. beans, so we think both crush and export numbers will be rising, probably to the tune of 40 to 60 million bushels each. So the U.S. is going to have to see its bean yield get up to 42.5 bushels per acre, or we're going to have a rationing market that goes forward. Lastly, kind of focusing here on the wheat market, the USDA found more wheat, both globally and domestically. The USDA raised the wheat crop in all classes except for U.S. winter wheat, U.S. soft red winter wheat. So the numbers were firmer on both. Wheat production and stocks were increased, and so this is seen as slightly negative for the wheat market, but the wheat market's been in a big decline, and thus we don't look for much selling here this morning. U.S. wheat production now forecast at 2.184 billion bushels. That's up from 2.112. End stocks on the domestic market, U.S., are raised to 743 million bushels. It's up somewhere in the vicinity of 35 million bushels from where we were in July of 706. So again, the wheat number seen as a little negative, increases in classes across the board. Globally, wheat end stocks were increased to 183.56 million metric tons. That's up from 181.2. So kind of in a nutshell here, we went through a lot of the numbers. There is some inconsistencies I mentioned earlier between cutting U.S. soybean demand, crush and exports, and raising corn, ethanol, and feed and export numbers. The trade is kind of taking a jaundiced eye towards that, but we really think that the market at this point has limited downside potential. We'll see how this crop comes home in terms of the late weather here in August, and also can we avoid an early frost freeze. That'll key price direction. We would caution people about coming overly bearish at this point, and really on a longer-term stretch, we think the bean market has great upside potential. November beans may drop near or slightly below $10 a bushel, but we would see that as a buying opportunity. Our upside targets still remain between 11 and 12. And on corn, December corn may make it down to something like $3 or $3.10 a bushel, but down the road we think corn prices can make it back to the $3.80 to $4.20 level. And in the case of wheat, it is probably the weakest of all the three. The wheat market should bottom here in the September futures contract between $4.60 and $4.70 a bushel. Our upside target would be back in the $5.40 to $5.60. This is Dan Bosse from Ag Resource Company. I hope that gives you some of a digestion of the reports. Again, we don't see any real earth-shattering news, but again, the numbers were larger than expected in corn, which will probably keep the market under pressure early to start today, but on a longer-term basis, we just would not be making any sales here. Hope everybody has a good day, and thanks again.